14th of April meeting of the TAC. I couldn't be on the last one, but I had a catch up with Jim in the interim to make sure we could cover that, because I was at an Open UK meeting, in fact. So there we go. Yeah, a normal antitrust policy notice. So people on this call are sometimes competitors, a lot of the time, in fact. So just do make sure that you obey the Linux Foundation antitrust policy. If in doubt, ask your own company's legal eagles. I'm sure they'll help you out. Code of conduct. These meetings are, as always, conducted in a kind of open and friendly manner. So, like I say, no big bouncer on the door preventing people getting in or throwing people out. So do familiarise yourself with the code of conduct, and if you've got any concerns, you can either approach people like myself and Jim. Failing that, there's always a catch-all kind of email address there as well, and then we'll sort out any concerns you've got. The TAC, these are the people on the TAC. I think there's not many of us here today, actually. I'll not put your second name in there. I must fix that. Shall do that later. I do apologise. So yeah, the agenda for today, very brief notes from me today, followed by Linux Foundation Public Health project updates. After that, there is a fantastic presentation on Linux for Healthcare. And then there's some future TAC topics and open discussion as well, and any news. And if there's any other items, we can do them after the presentation. Chair notes, like I say, not many at the moment. It's Easter, so a lot of people are kind of disappearing. Some interesting, there was a good meeting Open UK recently around health data space for the UK, but also around how and whether that effort should link into the same effort in Gaia X, which is not just an EU thing, but is being adopted by countries as far away as South Korea as well. So that's super interesting. I also have a new landscape page. I think the landscape is very kind of COVID-19 heavy right now, and I want to make sure that we're not viewed as a one-trick pony. So I finally figured out how to get the landscape page rendering. It's only taken me a year. So I'll be able to show that and get some feedback on that, please. So that's one of my asks. Other than that, there's no events or helps from myself. I know Jim went to an event last week or the week before. I've not had an update from him recently, so on that event anyway. So we'll try and get that next time. Project updates. I think, is anybody here from any of the other projects? Oh, hey Ed. I don't think we've got anybody on from the other projects. So I don't know, Lucy, have you got anything you want to mention, or are you just putting it in the notes?
I added in the notes, but I think one thing is that we're going to have a public-facing webinar for GCC and the completion of GCC and POC. Like in the notes, I added the 2 links. Yeah.
Yes, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, we're going to have the release out next week, so start promoting the webinar. But the links are already there, so that's pretty much introducing like the GCCN work to LFPH audience. Give them that.
Yeah, I'll make sure to. Are they on the LF Pub Health Twitter thing as well?
I'm sorry. What you mean Twitter?
There's a Linux Foundation Public Health Twitter account.
Yeah, we'll have it. So after the release is out next week, like we'll have like the Twitter stuff. I'm working with Rob on that. Perfect.
Yeah, I'll try and amplify that when I see it as well. Then, great stuff. In other project news, with my Herald hat on, had quite a bit of time to work on the Bluetooth mesh side of Herald recently. So got it to a point where we now have a working Bluetooth mesh system, and we have the ability to send presence data over that. So what this is the foundation of is kind of smart hospitals. So being able to track equipment in hospitals, so you can find it when you need it. So that's a use case that we're working on. So that is working. We're just making sure that the apps are kind of sensical, so you can have an end-to-end demo. And the ultimate target for that data will be a messaging system, probably in a hospital, for example, which can then be exposed to applications. One of the applications will be, where's my equipment? So that's one of the things I was talking around with Kubernetes for healthcare. So That's the mesh update from myself. But I don't think we've got any CAD or COVID green updates. I've certainly not been told about them. Presentation then, I think we'll dive straight into the presentation. So normally kind of 30 minutes with questions, but I think as it's such a light agenda, feel free to take a bit more time if you want kind of questions and Q&A at the end. I'll probably throw a few questions in at the end just because I know they're questions that other people have asked before about other projects. So if you're wondering why I'm asking these things when I didn't mention them the other day, that'll be why. But there's nothing scary in there. But I'll hand over control. Who's actually doing the presenting of the slides?
I'll present the slides and let me go ahead and get that set up here in a second.
So you
and swap screens. All right, so you guys should be seeing the non-presenter view at this point.
Oh, I can see the presenter's view.
Let me swap displays again. 1 second. There we go.
That's it.
Right. All right. So Ted, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
All right. This is the second slide, correct? I think
This is
okay. Let's start. For the record, everybody must know my favorite color is purple. So the Linux for Health color is definitively purple at this point. I wanted to, so over the past probably about 2.5 years now, possibly 3 years, I'm the global CTO and chief architect for all of Watson Health. So that's over about I think about 6,000 people in about 14 countries now. So that's over payer, provider, genomics, oncology. We have a complete company called Merge that does most of the image processing for GE Healthcare and others. I'm sure you're also very familiar with the company Truven that has the market scan information and health insights. We probably cover about 140 payers, and I forget how many provider systems we're engaged with. We have set out to, and I'm pretty sure you have seen the recent news that Francisco Partners has purchased all of the assets of and personnel of Watson Health. We're going to actually be an independent company, and which is going to allow us to move very quickly. And part of that is that we're going to be very, very dedicated to the world of healthcare and open source software. Relative to that, we stood up a project, and I think it was about 2.5 years ago. We've been working in stealth mode with this project that we have called Linux for Health. Relative to that, and this is kind of the impetus for it, that we see the 3 Ps of healthcare: paper, process, and people. The first bullet point on this, and these are very painful statistics. If anything from this presentation, I want everybody to really ensconce these numbers. 35 to 45% of all medical data at rest or in transit or in clear text. That was from a HIMSS cybersecurity work group in 2017 I was a part of. Then in 2015, there was $375 billion in payer waste in the US. And that number has probably gone way up. I've been very vocal in the industry on the third bullet point. For your children's sake and their carbon footprint, please kill the facts. I saw a number, and a CEO of a large company told me that's probably, we can probably put a 0 behind that number now in 2022. 80% of all serious medical errors involve miscommunication. I'm sure the breaches, this number was in 2017, 17,000. This came out of the same cybersecurity report, 17,000 breaches a day. And I saw a great thread on Twitter from a famous venture capitalist talking about how there's no such thing as AI in healthcare because probably 90% of the today's data is never used. Now, one thing when I arrived at IBM that was after my previous job, some of you may be familiar with my previous company. I was a CTO of PocketDoc. We had 1,000 third-party enterprise companies in the US, PillPack, Ascension, Dignity, Doctors on Demand, Teladoc, Livongo. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out, we had our own clearinghouse, our own PBM, EMRs, et cetera. And for the life of me, we always saw this black hole in the industry on the clinical and revenue cycle management. When I got to IBM, I found out that 80% of all healthcare transactions in the US eventually run through a mainframe. So this is the backstop for the emphasis of us for NewCo. We're shooting in the next year and a half to be 80% open source. Next slide. The pandemic has definitely, one of the things the pandemic has definitely shown that the healthcare system worldwide even is very siloed, especially in the US. And, you know, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z want it pushed to them. So we're definitely seeing put the data where the compute is, and having distributed edge enabled devices. Next slide. So what is Linux for Health? Well, we call it a distributed network operating system, and we're taking that in a very literal sense. We now have the ability to, at IBM, we've been working with the systems group where we're standing up logical partitions on mainframes. We're standing up both containers on AWS and Azure. And as you'll see, we've stood up edge devices like PyCharms and Jetsons to have everything seamlessly interconnected in a true operating system. It is my hope, at least, that this will enable a model that abstracts the need for intermediary third-party organizations and to deploy a developer extensible trust protocol, meaning that I want developers who have nothing to do with healthcare to be able to come in, copy pasta their favorite language, and be able to write a great healthcare application without all the sausage making. Next slide. And Carol, feel free to jump in at any time here.
Yep.
The backstop, there was some API legislation that I was very involved in the US. I'm not big on legislating technology. I say let water seek its own level, but it appears in healthcare that they're regulatory heavy. And it's a carrot stick situation. And I think is also interesting, in previous lives, I worked on the MPEG standard for media at scale. And it's always interesting to me in healthcare, you get 50 different answers on what interoperability means. Everybody talks about it, but nobody actually can interoperate. We want to provide a distributed transactional system that provides integrity. The other aspect with the zero config footprint, I kind of gotten fed up with provider systems and other systems where it takes 2 weeks to set up a VPN. So we're hopeful that we can have a zero config footprint. I'm very pro federated learning, both bounded and unbounded, and we must support batch and real-time processing. And once again, I want to abstract the details of any so-called health standards and create the first developer first mentality in health IT.
So quick question, do you want questions as you go or not?
Yeah,
I'm fine either way.
Go for it, dude. Hey, Ed,
Okay,
how you
so-
doing? I didn't know you were.
Hey.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, no, I had the video off of the first part as I was sort of pulling myself together. Yeah, so like there's a lot of exciting stuff here. And some of the things that come to mind, because I cross a huge number of spaces, and so I see a lot of analogous things. So the first one that comes to mind is most of the folks that I'm dealing with who are looking at industrial edge, retail edge, sort of many of the other kinds of edges, have sort of settled on the fact that probably the best vehicle to host workloads on those edges for them is Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you're seeing similar sorts of things, because you invoke Linux as Linux for healthcare here. And I can understand that. I'm absolutely a fan of good invocations to sort of try, pull things into people's brains. But I presume that you're probably going to be running something like Kubernetes on sort of what you probably would think of as the intermediate edge, the compute that's living near the edge, and then the devices themselves are running their own stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The second one that comes.
Carol, click to the next slide, because that's
Yeah.
So
I swear to God, I'm not being paid as a straight man.
No, and Ed, go ahead with the next question, and I can speak to that.
Yeah. So the next question that comes up to me, and this is a little bit more obscure. I'm very plugged into a lot of the identity communities, folks like Spiffy and Spire, and some of the next generation needs around that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's sort of coming up is, if you look at how most sort of identity and authorization and authentication is being done, it's ludicrously hop by hop, effectively. Yeah. And it actually matters a great deal when you're dealing with sensitive information in sensitive situations, of which I would expect healthcare to be one. It matters a great deal whose hands the request passed through on the way to the system you're dealing with. I've been calling this sort of the provenance of the call. Yep. Do you have any solutions in hand for that? And if you don't, we should probably talk, because I have some things in that direction that are going on in other communities you might want to know about.
Yeah. So let me parse those two great questions.
Sorry, lots of stuff.
No, dude. No self-deprecation at all. This speaks to the slide. We are, one of the things in NUCO we're doing, and I urge everybody to look up Linux One. I have a deep background in trusted execution environments, and we have a slide on this we'll talk to. But one of the things that we're bringing to bear as NUCO is reanimating the mainframe and allowing this to get out to some of the concerns that you're raising. I'm saying in the imperial we with NUCO, we're using NATS as a message bus, and we have some slides that we're using NATS as a message bus, Derek Collison stuff at Synyadia.
Oh yeah, no, the NATS guys are fantastic. Yeah.
So we've been developing with them for about close to 3 years now. And I'm a flat container person. I'm not gonna, as far as I'm concerned, you can do Docker Swarm, Ansible, or K8s, and I'm not, whatever deployment model you have. But the substrate for this, and we'll talk about it, is what we are pushing as part of NUCO is connecting the gnarly IBM Z and Linux One stuff to the rest of the world, and letting free field development happen as a function of that. So we're not gonna, like, with, if you want to use K8, Ed, knock yourself out.
No, I mean, the reason I sort of bring it up is it ends up, one of the other things that I have a lot of expertise in from some of the network service mesh stuff behind my head is, it turns out that there's a huge difference between trying to run a Docker container and trying to run a K8s container in practice, particularly when they need to communicate with something outside the cluster.
Peace, and that's why we're like, the message bus is both Kafka and NATS, and we're seeing people
I mean, we should probably take some of it offline, because there's a lot of sort of interesting detail I'd love to see where you've sort of arrived at. But I'm glad that you're thinking in those directions. I very much appreciate the try not to be over circumspect about what people are running and where. Because that, no matter what choices you make in that, you're going to screw up.
It's like a season to taste thing. You're never going to get the taste right for everybody. So we got to cut a line, but we're definitely focused on an operating system type level, and Carol can talk to that. But this longitudinal patient record that we are displaying here, we already have the data models in place in the open source for most of these things, which in a distributed compute fashion, putting the compute where the data is, that's the mantra. So however it gets,
we're going to get along. We're going to get along, my friend.
Carol, would you, Ed, thanks. Yeah, for everybody else too. Like, I'm super excited to be finally talking about this. Carol, you wanna roll for a while?
Sure. And I'll add on this slide that the Linux for Health in the center is largely just for illustration, because Linux for Health is completely decentralized. It runs on Z, it runs on Linux One, it runs on ARM, it'll run on Azure, AWS. There really is no Linux for Health in the center. In this drawing, we'll probably update that. Next slide. All right, so what is the Linux for Health OS? So Linux for Health, we're envisioning as a health OS. It runs as containers right now, but the goal is to have a compiled health OS on Alpine, on Ubuntu. Those are targeted for, if you look at the bottom, AMD, ARM64, and S390X are the targeted chipset environments. We'll run Alpine on ARM64, and Ubuntu is the OS of choice for S390X. And so we'll probably start with Ubuntu when it comes to building out the compiled health OS. And so this is where we've made the break between containers to actual OS. And in addition to the OSs, we've got all of the native development environments, Python and Go and Java. We've got Kafka. We talked about NATS Jetstream. And then built on that is the actual Linux for Health kernel. And that's the data fabric, which gives us connectivity, transcoding between one data format and another, and any other code that's needed for interoperability. In addition to protocols are supported, whether it's HTTPS or MLP or anything else we need for healthcare, and then combine that with the NATS messaging that we talked about for distributed computing. We'll see an example of that. We'll see a number of examples of that. And then on top of all that, we actually build the applications like NLP applications, the DID and tokenization, alongside any connectivity that's needed to any external servers like IBM Fire Server and Microsoft Fire Server, all with a developer first mentality. And there's a lot on this slide, so I'll pause to see if we have any questions here. This is a kind of a different slice of that. It's the chip architectures that we talked about with the OSs built on top of that, any real-time APIs, containers built on top of that for the container-based version of Linux for Health. And then on top of that, the Kafka and the NATS, and then the libraries. And we've done blockchain work. We've worked with all different SDKs. Those go in at that level. REST APIs, and then applications on top of that. There we go. As a part of Linux for Health, we have a number of different components already available. We've got distributed data connectivity and routing. We've got an EDI component that does data validation and enrichment and transformation across a number of different data formats, including X12 and HL7, CCDA, FHIR, and DICOM. And then we've got components that do conversions, kind of the more complex conversions that aren't done via the EDI component, like HL7 v2 to FHIR. We've got a HL7 v2, we support batch for HL7 v2, patient management service that manages patient identity within a set of patient records. Resource management that handles FHIR resources, especially where it comes to references between resources. We've got a gateway listener and the HL7 batch collector and other HL7 components. So there's a lot underway. A lot of the HL7 stuff is part of our health data pipeline component, which is why you see HTTP there. And so that's an end-to-end clinical and claims data pipeline.
Yeah, Carol, let me jump in here quick. For those familiar, I would urge you to look up the company MERS that we purchased. We took the complete production pipeline and put it into open source. That's all. And so that that's part and parcel. So we want to have in the longitudinal patient record, we want to have I think click to the next slide. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is where, and this should also for the identity stuff. I didn't answer your question, but as you see, we have things like Hyperledger Fabric and Ethereum clients hanging off the routes, if you will. And we have other things like we've added IPFS to Fire for those same reasons. So we're looking at a highly distributed system. But I wanted to emphasize the fact that much of this code that we have comes from these production environments that we have done previously with Watson Health. Of interest, currently for those in the United States, we already have 270, 271, 835, 837, and a 278, which is the eligibility claims. And oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, we have all of those transactions already. So we're building out a full compliant clearinghouse in the open source. That's going to be the first of its kind. So that's super for those in the United States, and even those with single and multi-payer systems that need to do EDI. The infrastructure is there, but you can grab the code now, both on the clinical side and the claim side. On the claim side, if you have a payer you want to hook it up to, you can probably get that done in 2 days.
So we've got a number of features in progress. We'll see a little bit more about the Apple Care Kit work that we're doing. We've got NVIDIA Jetson support in process, some additional IPFS support in process, and we're always adding data formats. So lots in progress still, and you'll see at the end how to help with that progress. All right, so we've done a number of different proof of value scenarios. We worked on a number of different scenarios. This one is all about IBM Z, integrating it with Linux One, integrating it with Azure and AWS. So in this scenario, we start with a provider that posts a piece of health data. In this case, it's a radiology image. And that he posts that to his cloud, which can be Microsoft Azure, it can be AWS. There's an intelligent health record that's a part of Linux for Health. The data gets saved down to that, synchronized to the other nodes in the process. And this triggers a claim submission to the payer. And that also triggers a claims authorization, a bill audit that's sent to the bill auditor that's running on Linux One, and the payers are running on IBM Z. And so the cornerstone of all of our proof of value scenarios is the fact that we've got very disparate systems all running Linux One and all communicating data across the different environments. And so the bill auditor supplies the bill audit, and ultimately the payer generates the payment back to the service provider. And this is all done via Linux for Health as part of secure data synchronization with NATs and in handling those messages. And so it's a good scenario for integration between cloud and Z. I'll pause here for questions.
Yeah, and the cool thing is the systems group put out an entire blog showing this running on Linux One and Z. It was from IBM. It was pretty, without us even knowing about it, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's when you're really starting to get the benefit of open source, when you sort of things you have no concept are going on start surfacing. The first round of which is your management being indignant that you didn't know everything that was going on, and you're explaining that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, so this is just gives you a flavor of the people that we've talked to. I candidly that as you have noticed, because we're going to be a new company, I'm kind of reducing the open shift rel footprint because of the cost, but obviously there's hooks in there to do it. This is purely a Linux play as far as I'm concerned, a pure Linux play. But Microsoft knows about at the executive level, Microsoft, NVIDIA. For those familiar with the MONI project from NVIDIA, we're getting ready to do a push where the MONI federated learning stuff is going to be part of Linux for Health. And that's the NVIDIA is driving that as a function of 15 other companies for image and AI processing. However, they have what I call a bounded model of federated learning, and we're coupling that with our view, NUCO's view of unbounded, and more like flow versus CPU or GPU bounded. But the MONI SDK is going to be part of it. AWS definitely knows about it. I know the VP of healthcare very well, so this should give you a flavor of who we've been talking to, and also includes Aetna and CVS.
So this is another version of the slide that we looked at earlier, and this happens to be our first proof of value scenario that we called dial tone, because it showed a level of connectivity using NATs across IoT, Z, and cloud. And it's basically the same scenario where you take a piece of health data and synchronize it down to the local longitudinal patient record, and then synchronize that across environments. But one thing this shows is that we used an orthogonal DICOM server here. And what we did with that was take the radiology image and convert it to PNG, and then synchronize that across the network. And that's what got stored in the longitudinal patient records. And it's really easy to integrate external servers like this with Linux for Health. Very straightforward.
If anybody knows anything about the extreme complications of DICOM and PACT, is just like the so-called standard, non-standard EDI world in the US healthcare system. This is just like a laundry list of things that we are going to be putting out as a function of NUCO in the open source. As most should know, we have our own server, a fire server that we created. We also, as a function of that, have worked closely with Microsoft. Jim St. Clair, if you're out there, my former co-founder Lisa Mackey runs the global alliances at Microsoft, and we've worked very closely with that group to put the Microsoft Fire server in there as well. So, and Ed, to your point, I'm not going to hold people. There's some other pieces and parts relative to the training and machine learning. We're going to be coming out. IBM's coming out with an AI chip that we're going to have as part of this. That does 3 million TensorFlow transactions per second within the transaction, and we're
sounds like fun.
Well, it's the test that we've done with the on our NLP stuff for health with the dual propagation RNNs. It's mind bending, because you can have, relative to a Z or a Linux 1 system, you can have 32 of those chips per backplane. So 3 million chips, 3 million transactions per second, I think it's like 94 trillion transactions per year. So it starts getting stupid at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is actually a problem in systems where you get good enough at the thing that suddenly your issue becomes less about processing capacity and more about I/O.
Yep.
Yep.
I/O.
And I'm very familiar with some of those kinds of problems as well, because I've we really should talk.
Yeah, my background's totally in media processing, Ed. So
you're familiar with the processing, CPU twiddle thumbs waiting for next block problem.
Yep, dig it.
Yeah.
All right, next slide.
Skip this one?
Skip that one. That's
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about eligibility verification and just the the problem with eligibility verification and having multiple providers requesting the same thing over and over again is really what this slide shows. And what we can do in the Linux for Health environment, and here you can see there's a payer and Linux for Health, and those are co-located. That's like the Linux for Health instance for the payer that you can see in the center. You're not seeing my cursor moving, but in this environment, you can imagine having the providers do an eligibility request, but they can get that information from their local Linux for Health instance, as long as there was an eligibility verification request, say a minute in the past or a day in the past. That information, that result of that request gets synchronized back to the Linux for Health instances running at the lab provider and the general practitioner and the surgeon, and it cuts down on the redundancy of these requests. And another scenario that we've done across Azure and Z, illustrating that ability to automatically make those requests, eligibility verification requests, from the native Z environment and getting that back to the payer running on Azure.
Can I talk to this one, Corley?
Oh, please do.
So I get excited about this. Check out those numbers, folks. So having a background in trusted execution environments, when I got here to IBM, I looked at the system and I was like, wow, it's pretty amazing. It's got a real-time crypto coprocessor that does, SHA-256 AES in real time. And it's the only piece of hardware in the industry that does FIPS 140-2 level 4 compliance. And that, for those that know about the SWIFT transaction in FinTech, the Department of Treasury uses this box to do cross-country international fiat currency transfers. MasterCard, Visa, and American Express use this. But the compute power just for one blade, if you will, 2 million Docker containers and a 17 terabyte MongoDB. And that's a bunch of coming from Apple. That's a bunch of PowerPC coprocessors, but super exciting. I think about 40 of the main crypto companies are using this box for mining. It puts an interesting spin on it, since we have added blockchain stuff. And there's some other companies out there that I know of that might be on this call that use this that I can't talk about. But once again, we're reanimating and extending this as a function to the industry to have these compute systems available. And I think there's probably a slide. And the great thing about it is, as most know, health is kind of a scale up, but you can also scale out with this as well. And the slide that I'm probably even more excited about is the next one. The Apple Care Kit exclusively uses Linux 1. It uses that box to run Care Kit and the Research Kit. And we're working very closely with them to put out a pull request that executes the slide that you see in front of you. I call this the Grand Unified Field Theory slide. I'm not sure if this code exists anywhere else in the industry, but I also see a future, hopefully with the Linux Foundation, if this is adopted, where we have Android and other mobile OS frameworks like Titanium and other development systems that we can put on the front end of this and allow mobile applications to proliferate on this platform. So I think we made it home, Corley.
I think so. So I didn't do a good job of introductions at the beginning, but I'm one of the architects and developers of Linux for Health, and we've got information about how you can go find out more information and how you can contribute. And we would welcome contributions. And that's it.
proud.
Great stuff. Yeah, well done. Super interesting stuff. I think everybody will agree it's very exciting. Couple of quick questions as I channel my predecessor. You mentioned some things are open source, some things aren't. On the slide of the components you showed earlier, can you give us a rough idea as to what is, what isn't, just from a concept point of view, please?
So what is available today and what is not?
Well, just what's open source, what's closed source? You know, is it the kind of manageability pieces? Is there a particular one?
Oh, actually, everything that we talked about.
Everything.
Perfect.
Every single
that's the answer
thing.
I was looking
Yeah.
for.
The Zen, all the feature requests, Zen Hub, GitHub, everything is completely free to air. And you know, we are hoping to stand up. We have the domain name linuxforhealth.org and .io, and we want to stand up the website to that effect and link it through Linux Foundation and LFPH.
Great stuff.
And as a function, I'll just let everybody know, if Jim's still on the call, I've been pushing really hard on the membership side with companies like Intel and other, and I just candidly, I just received a very long email from Intel saying that they're probably going to join.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hurrah! Yeah, I've been heavily working on them as well, so that's great.
I know we've been beating them from 3 different sides, so it's time for me to step up.
So a couple of quick things I'll mention just in passing. You probably already have them covered. But I mentioned that everybody who's starting a new open source project, because a remarkable percentage of the time they don't. So it's great you have the domains. That's fantastic. I presume you have the Twitter handle at hand.
God, did I space out on that or not?
Because the Travis domains, Twitter handle, and GitHub org, and I presume from your comments you got the GitHub org at hand as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
So,
look at
again-
Twitter.
And it's weird because I mean we can bring this up at the you know, we can talk about this. A lot of people do I call it the Prince version of Linux for Health, and they go L4H. So
Well, you're going to want to get those domains too,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because you know the shortened domains are things people will also use.
yeah.
The other thing that sort of immediately came to mind for me when you're talking about standing up your website, if you haven't already, it is a huge advantage to do what most of the cool open source projects are doing these days. Keep a GitHub repo for your site, use a static generator like Hugo, and basically publish with something like Netlify or Cloudflare. And it's a huge advantage because if you do a WordPress site, it's effectively written in stone. Nobody can change it. You're stuck with whatever you got. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And I've seen the people who don't go the static generation sites eventually regret them.
Yeah. So my previous company was all exactly what you talk about: dynamic documentation, on push, et cetera, et cetera. So yep.
Fantastic. Because that way the community can contribute to your site, and man, that makes a huge difference.
All the way, man. Jim knows how I feel about that. So
I think one other thing I wanted to bring up is, I know we've talked about, you know, the concept that I had with a couple of other people around kind of Kubernetes for healthcare, concentrating on the developer end and Kubernetesifying lots of open source healthcare componentry versus yourselves with the Linux for healthcare thing. And I think we came to a rough conclusion that they were pretty complementary rather than competitive. I was wondered, just for the benefits of everybody else who weren't on that call, do you want to say anything about that?
oh yeah, we had a kumbaya session, and it worked out really well because you know, that's why we have the proverbial cake diagram in there showing the layers. And without us even discussing about it, it was like, you know, Adam presented VMware's view on the K8s for healthcare, and it was like, oh, yours fits, your chocolate fits here, the peanut butter fits here, and we got a Reese's peanut butter cup. So if you can't tell, I like food, so the cake and Reese's. So yeah, but
the
it
whole
worked out.
cake and food thing is a very pivotal thing as well. So
Yeah. So it worked out. It worked out well without us even having a discussion about the pieces and where they fit. But it's my hope that we can get this up leveled and get everybody started on it. Because one of the things we've done is the reason that we haven't come out and pushed this heavily is because, and I'm going to be rather provocative here, and Jim he knows where I'm probably going with this from my previous company. Certain incumbents are going to push back on this. And
certain incumbents, certain sectors of the industry.
I have scars, Mr. St. Clair.
And I appreciate Carol's use case slide, but I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, I mean, it's kind of like using a Sidewinder missile to kill a squirrel. But
Those squirrels, the clever things, you got to, right.
Yeah, not to pontificate, but I mean, I think this is the right group here. And I know I've talked to each of you individually and collectively as a group. I've had conversations late as yesterday, exchanges on LinkedIn that just talks about, well, what can big tech do in healthcare? And nobody freaking gets it right, because everybody thinks in terms of, well, you'll kind of change this process or this process. No, we need a disruptive technology platform that completely changes the way we use healthcare data, because that'll be the foundation for how policy changes and the way organizations connect with patients in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. And I think the more people, more groups that are being disruptive in kind of small areas, the more people we can enable, the more startups we enable on that, then the better the open source community will work together to create platforms that quickly develop on top of this and create new applications. And the quicker we'll get to better patient outcomes as well, which is obviously a huge thing for all of us. So I think this is super, super exciting. And I think, yeah, thanks for the presentation. Definitely. And I'll, if there's not any more questions, I'll quickly go back to the presentation. I think there's only a couple of things left to talk about. So yeah, thanks a lot for that presentation. That was fantastic. I don't know, Jim, did you want to say anything? I don't know about what the process is for new projects in LFPH and how, where this is, if it's going that way, who's writing the documentation, where it's at. I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything on that.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to discuss with Ted and Carol next steps for onboarding this as a project. I know Ted and I have talked, however, about timelines, and I appreciate the shift to the new co and how we want to structure that in. So all that's great, but I welcome and relish the discussion today to at least lay the foundation for where we're going to be going, relatively soon, as well as in connection with your efforts, Adam, around Kubernetes for healthcare and where that goes. And then there's a third piece. I've been juggling two TAC calls this morning because I'm also on the Akrino call for LFEdge. Because LFPH has just executed a liaison agreement with the Digital Twin Consortium to start looking at digital twins in healthcare. And they said, oh, welcome aboard. We also have this one with LFEdge. And so I hadn't talked to LFEdge yet to try and straighten that out. But making I think we have a great opportunity with Ted's alma mater, University of Miami, to start doing things around open source frameworks, libraries, and tool sets for digital twin applications in healthcare, be it single cell biology or holistic patient modeling. And I can't help but feel that the data sets here, particularly if I look at something like Akrino and edge computing and fit that in as overlays here with LFH and with K8s for healthcare, that we've got a pretty holistic platform potentially coming together in some amount of time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's really good. And update on the K8 side, I got the project proposal. So I've got an internal version to kind of jazz up VMware on it. Yeah. And
I did mention it to Ed. Didn't have any comments, but I did specifically call out K8s on the board meeting on Tuesday.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I got, sorry about that. I missed that because I totally got the time zones wrong like an idiot. So I finally got the invite and then totally messed up the time zones, which was classic. But yeah, I'll make sure I'll catch up on that. But yeah, so I'll be submitting. I'll send you, Jim, and I'll probably CC Ed on that as well, if you don't mind, just to review that before I put it public, because the way my brain works is different from everybody else. So like,
happy to help in any way, and don't be too hard on yourself. Everyone's brain works differently. It took me a long time to realize.
yeah, that's the thing. So we've got that ready, so that's good. And there's a public Miro on it as well. So that's and I think, you know, talking through with Ted and Carol last week as well, like solidified, you know, my you know, assumption that that's how it would fit in well with other systems, and so that's fantastic. So it's been great. I think future TAC presentation topics. I think these two ideas were on the previous call. I don't know if they've developed any further. So GCCN development, is this going to be a topic, or is this an old bullet point?
Adam, do you mean that moving GCCN into LFPH? Is that what it means?
No, I think there was ideas for future TAC presentation topics, like the one we've just seen.
Oh yes, we're going to do it next time on April 28th, pretty much presenting the POC, the updates to the TAC.
Brilliant, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I got the date for that, so I'll put that date in here and then mention it as well. So that's brilliant. New project ideas. So yeah, as I mentioned, Kubernetes healthcare, the Miro's there, the proposal's there. So I'll get a couple of people to have another look through it. I've had people internally look at it. That'd be great. Time into the TAC meeting, as we mentioned before, there was one last topic I wanted to briefly cover, and I'm probably not going to ask for a discussion on it given the time, but I did a new kind of Adam's layout of the landscape slide to make it less just COVID and make it kind of more generic. So I'll share this link, but for the benefits of the video, the general idea is that, yes, we've got a kind of COVID digital contact tracing exposure notification kind of column, but then there's different layers at different levels of abstraction. So there's the end user stuff at the top, the kind of frameworks in the middle, and then any foundational technologies and libraries below that with the standards below that, because that's kind of a logical building blocks approach. But I'll share this. There's some projects on here that on the current landscape page, just because I was trying to show some different ways of doing things. So I'll share this link in the notes, and then we can have a full chat about it the next time. But I just wanted to make sure that we covered that off.
And Adam, on a related note, not TAC specific, but we are in the process of going through a update to the landscape as well as updating the website, working closely with the format that CNCF has to try and kind of follow that same flow and update the graphics and, you know, really start to supercharge the bit. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good time to do it as well with like new projects coming in. It makes sense to kind of adopt something that where everything can fit somewhere logically, and you can build things on top of other things as well. So yeah, that should be really good. But is there any other business from anybody else? Oh, there's a chat message. What have I missed? All right, that's fine. It's just that Tony's lost to go. There's no other business, and thank you for your time. It's been a fantastic time. It's a great presentation. I'm really looking forward and getting super psyched about this as well. So yeah, I'm presenting the kind of whole LFPH benefits to other people in VMware in a couple of weeks' time in New York for a big healthcare summit that we're doing internally. So I'll give you some updates on that. I'm hoping I can make the call because I'll be in the right time zone. So I'll try and be on that call in a couple of weeks' time as well. Well, thank you all for your time and have a wonderful weekend. And see you in a couple of weeks.
Everybody.
Bye,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Take care.
Thanks. Great job, everybody.